Today we have on Taylor Starch. Taylor is a strength and conditioning coach who specializes working with the tactical population and has worked with a lot of athletes dealing with shin splints. In this episode, we talk about his training philosophies and how to overcome and properly diagnose shin splints. You can follow Taylor on Instagram at Taylor Starch, and as always, thanks for listening and enjoy the episode.
Before we hit the intro music, I wanted to introduce to you guys the Yoakum Strength Insider. The Yoakum Strength Insider is our online training platform that takes all of the ideas that we talk about on this podcast and implements them into a program that is available to you at the touch of your fingers. Our goal with the Yoakum Strength Insider is to create better movers, to level up your life, and to move forward from where you are. We do this in a holistic fashion. Not only will you receive a program that has helped hundreds of people become better movers, you'll also receive access to our app that allows you to track everything, has video links for all exercises, and allows you to be in constant communication with the Yoakum Strength coach. Along with this, you'll get our 30-page PDF nutrition and lifestyle guidelines. That includes everything from what to eat, how much of it to eat, why we're eating it, meditation habits, and other lifestyle habits that we implement with our clients to really level up their lives. If you're interested in trying out one of these programs, use podcast 25 in the discount section right before you pay for 25% off your first program. Boom.
This is the Yoakum Strength Podcast. Take the leap down the rabbit hole with us as we interview elite level guests to unravel what high performance really is.
All right, well, Coach, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to have you here.
What's up? Here we are.
We've been talking about how nervous you are this whole time. You ready?
Dude, it's hard, being in the room with a couple legends. I'm just getting sweaty. I'm only at 10 grams of creatine, which based on the latest literature is about, I'm half repping it.
Bro, half repping it? You need at least 50 grams now based off this future.
I'm lengthened partialed my creatine.
We were talking about boner pills before, taking Cialis before to compare your nighttime erections to your son. Like, we are ready. We are dialed for this podcast. But Tristan sent me your page, and it was pretty dope, dude. I talked to you about a couple things that I wanted to kind of dive deep into with you, specifically shin splints, because I get that question all the time. But we'll tease that a little bit for the people. We'll make them listen. It's a little strategy there for social media, but. One of the things that I loved kind of about your training and your page, and one of the posts that I wanted to start with talking to you about is you said it's like when you study for the CSCS, you study for all these like classes, they give you this like situation of, all right, you're training this Navy SEAL, he runs a 4.5, he squats 500 pounds, he cleans and jerks 325, like he's just an animal, what do you do with him? And then you're like, yeah, real life situation is you're working with a guy that can't fucking squat, has broken hips, has 17 surgeries, and now is required to run 17 miles and stay alive, right? Like, what is that like approach, like the real life versus the kind of textbook approach to training? And what did you have like big eye-opening moments where you're like, God damn, dude, like what we're talking about is just, it's not real life. It's not what's right in front of me.
Well, I mean, you have all the answers when you go to school. You think you do. You get your CSCS, and then you get your RSCC, whatever. You get your master's degree. You've got all the papers and letters next to your name that say what you're doing. You've got your squats, your hinges, your pushes, and your pulls. You've got your single leg RDLs. You've got your 5x5s. You've got your 4x8s and your 3x10s. And you're ready to go. And then you finally get someone, whether it's a D1 athlete or I primarily work with tactical dudes, so soft guys, operators. And you're like, okay, here we go. So you've got, your list of intervals. You've got your sick variations of, like Zerker, deadlift, Jefferson, Narnia Warrior the Third. And then all of a sudden the dude comes in, has a patellar tendinopathy that's been going on for like 2 years, ACL surgery on the left that they never rehab. Their right shoulder hurts. Anytime they do pull-ups, they've got drastic elbow pain. And it's what you realize is that it's messy. It's not this simple, clear cut, like, okay, here's what you do with the same person that you did with the last. But I think what you realize is that there's a difference between knowing things and then understanding them and then being able to actually implement the things you know and understand. Right? You come out of school, you get your certifications and you know things, right? That's just knowledge. But then it takes going in and training a ton of people to actually start to understand the things they say in the books, right? And then the stuff that you've read and the stuff you've seen and the stuff you've heard. But then you start realizing, wait a second, like I'm going to have to figure a lot of this out for me, right? Because you might know what freaking Mark Ripito says when it comes to building barbell strength. And then all of a sudden you get a dude in front of you and you're like, this guy can't touch a barbell or else he's going to explode into a million pieces, right? So it's like, or, this is what Pavel says about how to get people better with kettlebells. And it's like, okay, well, this dude can't even figure out a kettlebell snatch worth his life. So then your game plan goes out the window, right? When I remember going to every cert. So I got done getting my RKC, RKC2. And then I was force feeding everyone the kettlebell snatch. And then you're like, half the people can't even fit. It doesn't even matter. So it's like, you just all of a sudden get to this place where you understand that knowledge is just knowledge. And if you don't understand what you know, you're not going to be able to actually apply it. And applying it with experience is where we get wisdom. And so I think a lot of coaches, like it's 2025. You can type into AI today and you know everything instantly, right? So, okay, I've got a Navy SEAL, chat. I've got a Navy SEAL in front of me, chat. He's got this, and it's going to spit out exercises. Well, do you even understand what those exercises are trying to do? Do you even understand the adaptations you're trying to create? And do you know how to even put that all together? I say this all the time, right? Just because you know a bunch of ingredients in the kitchen doesn't mean you know how to cook. I can give a ton of people a recipe and they can mess it up, screw it up, and not produce anything that's tasty.
Yeah, dude, that's so fire. And there's like two kind of camps there, and the camps that I am drawn to recently is the middle ground that you're kind of finding in this pendulum swing, because you have this like anti-knowledge, anti-science kind of background, and a lot of times it's just your bias. It's like, I didn't go to school, I just trained people right away. I'm the hardo, I'm the strength coach, I have the wisdom. But you have the wisdom without any knowledge, and not even knowledge. A lot of times it's without the tools, right? It's without knowing those vegetables. It's without knowing the things you could cook with, right? And then you have the other side where they know everything and they weaponize that knowledge without ever like learning how to cook. Like you said, like they know everything and then they're so self-assured in that knowledge. And both camps are missing the point that you need to have both, right? Like you need to know the things that you can cook with. You need to have your tools. And the more tools that you have, the more certs that you have, the more knowledge that you gained, the more wisdom that you're able to work with, the more paintbrushes that you're able to stroke, right? But without the ability to actually put it all together, none of it actually matters. And I really do believe the field needs to find a little bit more of that common ground. And I've definitely swung on this pendulum both ways as well, where when I was out of college, it was all knowledge, man. That's all it was. And I thought I had all this answers. And every time I had a real life situation in which the answer in the chat GPT answer wasn't working, it was because it was the athlete's fault. It was the real life's fault. And then I like had this realization of like, man, that is so fucking stupid. Like you have real life, you have reality right in front of you that you're ignoring for this textbook, and you're weaponizing that textbook. You're backing up like any insecurity you have as a strength coach with that textbook while ignoring real life in front of you. And it's a weird like puzzle that we just, I mean, I think a lot of it's just ego, just letting go, man, and using both sides of the puzzle. And you become a significantly better strength coach when you do that.
Well, I love what you said. Like that pendulum swing is that's so important to understand that it's going to happen and it will happen and should happen. And not just in training, because so when I first started, so I'm coming up on almost 20 years in the industry, but when I first started, like it was all go to this certification, go to this certification, go to this. It was like the pendulum had swung to go to every cert on the sun, go to a TRX cert, go to a kettlebell cert, go to USA weightlifting. Go, I can't even think of all of them off the first, right? Go to original strength, go to all the basically cert junkies, right? And then what happened is after like I was in the industry 10 years, then it was the opposite. Then people were like, hey, yeah, FRC people are super dogmatic. The whole every system is dogmatic. Then the pendulum swings to the other side. Then
dogmatic. So,
yeah. Then all of a sudden it's like, excuse me, I use the best tool for the job. I don't follow a system. And it's like, okay, well then how do you repetitively produce results? You have to. All systems are flawed. Some are just more useful than others, and some are damn more useful than others. But then it swung to like. In this recent phase, especially like when I was interviewing like young strength coaches for like positions and stuff, we'd be like, okay, so like what are some like courses you've been to? What are some people you've learned from? What are some summits you went to? And they're like, yeah, like I got my CSCS or I have my bachelor's. And I'm like, what else? And they're like, that's it, because you don't need a cert to be successful. It's like, okay, yes. So they had like, so we went from like exposing yourself to everything and almost becoming like just chasing the letters next to your name to, oh, if you go to like a DNS cert or a PRI cert or FRC cert, you're a dogmatic monster and you can't think outside your system or implement it that way. But that pendulum swing doesn't just happen with like experience and knowledge. It's happening just even in the industry too. Ready? When I first came in, everything I was being taught was, yo, you got to get people out flexion, anterior pelvic tilt, lumbar extension, anterior pelvic tilt, lumbar extension. And then all of a sudden, what is it, 5 years ago? No, everyone's stuck in extension. The pendulum swings back. We got to get everyone posterior tilt, flexion, zerkers, Jefferson curls. And now it's like swinging back where people are like, okay, same thing. First came in the industry, you got to learn Mark Ripito starting strength. You got to go barbell squat, US 8 lifting, right? All that stuff. Gym 1, there's 5x3. Then all of a sudden, barbell squats are the devil. Now all of a sudden, barbell squats are back, right? And what was it? Knees out was the CrossFit thing. Then all of a sudden recently we told people squat knees forward. Now everyone's going knees out again. I mean, what I'm getting at is there's this pendulum swing that happens in every area, even cardio, right? High intensity cardio is the best. Now we're in the zone 2 craze. And what's going to happen here, I guarantee in the next 2 years, everyone's going to start bashing zone 2 and it's going to be back to high intensity.
Well, it kind of fits though in the like whole one of the very first things I think it was DeFranco was talking about on the podcast. It's along the lines of like the best program you're doing is the one you're not on, and it's like the low hanging fruit. It's like once you obsess over a certain thing, like obviously there's low hanging fruit to grab there, so you get a lot of great results, and because you get great results right away because it's something you suck at, right? You're like, yes, this is the answer. Then you never do anything else. You stop getting the results. The only way to get results again is to go do something that you suck at, like go on the other end. And yeah, so it makes sense, like pendulum wise. And one of the things with the consults, I have a lot of consults with the young strength coaches. One of the books I always recommend they read is the book Range. And I think Range does one of the best jobs.
Oh, yeah.
Dude, talking about how all of these random connection points of like you learn something over here, you learn something, you learn from fucking Seidman. Whether it's most of it, like most of the stuff I learned from Seidman is not training, obviously, but marketing, right? Like you can learn the marketing piece over here, and then somebody that actually knows what they're talking about but has no idea how to market, and then you make that connection that nobody has made before, which is that middle point, which is you, which is your system and the thing that works. But again, without those data points, without those connection points on the extreme, that's why I believe there is power in these fucking crackheads, these people that like believe, like, I mean, I haven't got into the go to stuff, but I'm sure even if you did the go to stuff, you could probably learn one thing.
Well, clearly you would have been able to prevent Jason Tatum's Achilles, bro.
Dude, that funny. Didn't he used to be a go to athlete? Like,
I swear he did. It's like one where I'm almost positive.
It's like the Berenstein Bears, bro.
I was trying to find clips. I was like, I guarantee these dudes used to say this was the guy. Just like I'm sure they were like, Nick Chubb was a monster.
Dude, it's actually fucking insane. But yeah, the ability to make the connections only happens when you have those other connections. And I think, like you were saying, it's been kind of thrown out. And one of the things you were talking about with the Navy SEALs is how you walk in, you have all this data piece, right? Like you have all these things, and you get an athlete that can't do anything. And one of the things I really liked is how your kind of system or philosophy of how if you always sacrifice health for performance, eventually you're going to have to sacrifice performance for health, not by choice, but because you start to get broken, right? And that kind of pendulum too, in and of itself, is kind of a wild one of like, you're always sacrificing the small stuff for the big stuff. Eventually the big stuff breaks you. And I see this a lot with the powerlifters I work with, man. It's like, only big 3 lifts because it's the only thing that matters, right? And all you do is just eventually break yourself because you're doing the same things over and over again and running your head into a wall. You break yourself, and in the long term, then you have to take all these steps back. Where in the meantime, you could do some of this silly stuff that the power lifters look at. Maybe it's some of the knee rotation stuff that you're talking about, or just general movement with a power lifter, man. You do some general health stuff with them, general movement stuff, general joint stuff with them, so that they can funnel their performance. But it's that balance again, and I feel like we've gotten out of that balance. But I'd like to hear you kind of talk about that kind of philosophy of health and performance and how those two things can go together. It's not necessarily one or the other.
Yeah. So, back in the day, like the golden era, like strongmen, like Arthur Saxon and Eugene Sandow, some of the old time strongmen, there was no separation of health and strength. And there was this not like war between the two. Like when you say like health before performance, people think, oh, I'm just going to go sit in front of a red light mirror and I'm not going to deadlift. I'm like, come on. Like, no, that's not what we're saying and stuff like that. Right. It's synonymous, right? You can't build a house without a foundation. And everyone says the foundation is important until it comes time to actually build it. But here's the example I use, right? So I want you to picture we're at a stoplight and we're both in, what's your favorite car that you used to race in Need for Speed? Of course, it's the Lamborghini Diablo, right? 100 speed, zero handling. I'm talking like the golden days. By the way, quick question. Sorry, tangent. Do you think we're going to get the answer to what is optimal for hypertrophy before we get Grand Theft Auto 6?
Yeah. Bro, Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to change the game. It's going to be full like
dude,
virtual
what
reality.
if in the game they have like the option to do like the ones like we'll keep going off that. It could get really weird. But so we're at a stoplight. You and I are in Lamborghinis. We look at each other and we're like, it's go time. We're going to race. Okay. Red light. All of a sudden, 3, 2, 1, green light. We both slam down the gas pedal as hard as possible. All of a sudden, I start tearing off. And you're screeching your tires. You're going forward, but it feels like you're being restricted and held back. You look down and your emergency brake is on halfway. Is your first thought in that moment to catch Taylor, to win this race, to increase my speed, my performance, and forward progress? I'm going to push the gas pedal down harder. No chance. Your first thought is remove the parking brake. So that's more my philosophy when it comes to training. It's not that I'm telling people to stop pushing the gas pedal down. That's where people get it mixed up, is they think because I'm saying, hey, you've got parking brakes on your body. If you take that parking brake, so even if you don't push the gas pedal down harder, if you take the parking brake 20% off, will you not get more forward progress easier with less effort and energy and less, right, resistance? Yes, you will. So if we acknowledge that, then we know there's tons of parking brakes on the body. That could be a mental parking brake, right? That's why David Goggins crushes it, right? He removes mental parking brakes from people. Some people, it's a technique parking brake, right? They're an absolute Gumby and they can't figure out a hinge, right? For other people, it is a mobility thing. Their joints don't move. What a wild concept. I know people hate mobility and they're like, okay, just do this 90-90 flip and flop. It's like, bro, if the hip doesn't move, like, what's your game plan? Okay. Or maybe it's a lack of muscle mass, right? You just got an iPad kid and they need to get a little more muscle mass. I want you to think that when I view training, it's not this gas pedal parking brake, but most people, unfortunately, past the age of like 12, are starting to develop parking brakes because of life, because of injuries, because of that. And in the gym, we're always gas pedal coaches, which is great. We know how to gas pedal. Like, just think about like how Christian McCaffrey goes about training. Do you think Christian McCaffrey was having Achilles issues because he wasn't doing enough plyo work? No chance. He's a gas pedal dude. That guy's a monster. But we tend to forget that sometimes you're going to get progress quicker with a parking brake coming off versus a gas pedal down further.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something we've talked about quite a bit too, is letting the sport, the activity almost dictate what your weaknesses are by doing it for a little bit and seeing what that is. We just had a cycling strength coach on a few weeks ago, and it was like, well, these guys are already doing 25, 30 hours a week of riding, but they can't touch a weight. Like he was mentioning, some can't do a push-up when they start with him. And it's like, well, what do you think they're going to get more out of? Adding another hour of riding or adding a little bit of strength work and being able to do 10 push-ups and a pull-up and do an ass to grass squat and a regular deadlift and becoming an actually more resilient human who can be better at their activity by maybe sacrificing 2% of their total time. And I think that's something that if you don't work with athletes or don't see how different athletes doing the same activity can have different weaknesses, you'll never understand. You'll just try to fit everyone into a mold that isn't necessarily going to work. There's going to be that survivorship bias that a lot of people like to have from their coaching.
Well, it's because, it's mainly because people are like when people go to the gym, they're focused on they're picking exercises. That's what a lot, well, whether that's a person training or a coach coaching, they're thinking about exercises. Okay, I want to get this person better at this lift. It's like, okay, that's not wrong. If the lift is desired or required, then it is required and it's desired, so do it. But if the lift is not desired or required, it's not. And so the key is that in the gym, right, we're chasing adaptations, right? I don't care how you go about business, right? I don't care if you're a barbell dude. I don't care if you're a movement flow person. Every person in the gym has to win by two ways. You have to adapt. You have to adapt or die, and there has to be progressive overload. We can all agree on that, right? We might disagree on whether it's one set to failure, because you can't do more than 4 sets apparently nowadays, right? I know the Mike Metzer and Dorian Yates philosophy is super hard right now. But we got to think that in the gym, our goal isn't the completion of exercises. It's adaptations. I can go do a workout and get a great lift in, but I might not achieve the adaptations I want, right? Just like if I go and I grab a bunch of ingredients to bake a cake, if I don't do it with the right amounts at the right temperature for the right duration, it's just a mess. Now, is it edible? Yeah, for sure, but it's probably not a great cake. So I think what's happening is we're getting lost in exercises, and we need to come back to adaptations and say, okay, what's the athlete's goal? Okay, what adaptations do they not have? Because that's the difference between training and rehab, right? Rehab is trying to gain behaviors and adaptations that you've lost. Training is trying to acquire stuff you don't have, right? So people will all say training equals rehab. Not exactly, because rehab, you're trying to get back stuff you've lost. So the reason why people are always chasing to get back stuff they've lost, and they're always spending time rehabbing and regressing, is because their measure of success in a workout is not progressive overload. It's how much they fail at an exercise or how much they struggle in an exercise. And that doesn't mean that we don't struggle. That doesn't mean it's not hard. But the whole point, like I said, is we've got to think about how do we create progressive overload via the adaptation that's going to give our athlete the best chance at removing the parking brake and then giving them the gas pedal to push it further.
Dude, the removing the parking brake is something I really want to dive into with you, because it's something that I was working with these middle school, kind of like young high school, middle school type kids. And one of the things that I was noticing is the lack of inhibition in these kids. Like, they would put something on the bar. I mean, it would be stupid. I'd look away for 10 seconds, and kids that have never deadlifted before are picking up, like, there'd be a 315 on the bar that just like was left by like one of our big lineman guys from the morning. And they would just try to yank it up. And the strength they were able to put in that bar for their relative like body weights and strength levels that they actually have was insane. Like, the way they were able to just torque their body and just fucking rip at that bar.
Awesome.
It was kind of sick.
And they don't have like this neuroticism about training that we've all developed through coaching and the internet and learning, which is terrible. Like, it's, those first couple of years, like when you're just getting into lifting and there's no wrong and rights and this and that, and, oh, that's not optimal. And you're cranking it. Now, you make a lot of mistakes, but there's some good in that. There's real good in that. Keep going.
Dude, but you're so right there. And it's like you lose that at some point, whether it's neuroticism or just like an injury locking up the central nervous system. But like you see it in an athlete that is significantly stronger, but cannot, like, I know you made a post about how like we're using like 30% of our central nervous system, and you see these kids, it's like, I don't know how much they're using, but they're using much more than the much stronger athlete. And I get the stronger athlete's more efficient, but it's like we almost like get to a point in which we have governors on our system, and these kids don't have it. It's like, how do you get to a point in which you can take that governor off, and how are you working with that? And honestly, how do you see it like developing? Like, how do we develop these governors ourselves?
Oh man, this gets me all hyped right now. So I love that. So I might go off. I might go off the deep end here because I get so excited talking about this.
Do
So
it.
I'm not someone special. I'm not saying my way is the right way, but I think differently from most coaches when it comes to progressing people. Okay, so most people are going to agree that the nervous system is almost like an entity that is right, the great governor, right, that is going to limit or inhibit strength, right? So here's what I want you to think is when most people go about strength training, like they're thinking push my limits, force my limits, and yes, there has to be challenge. There has to be right there has to be stimulation of the type 2 fast twitch fibers, right? There has to be neuromuscular coordination. But let's set that aside for a second and think about this, okay? So when it comes to strength is like a weird phenomena if you think about it, right? Because depending on who you ask what is strength, some people are going to say it's how much you can lift in a barbell. Other people, it's going to say how much you can lift relative to your body weight. Other people are going to say, well, that runner who ran the 2-hour marathon strong as hell because they're running 4:35 miles, right? For 2 hours straight. There's different levels of strength. Maybe it's physical strength, maybe it's spiritual strength, maybe it's whatever. But here's what I want you to think. Have you ever heard stories of someone, let's say it gets in a car crash, and let's say it's an older lady, like, in her 50s or whatever, and there's kids in the car, and the car is, crumbled, and it's maybe, let's say it's on fire. Have you ever heard stories of someone like ripping off the car door, right? Or, someone's trapped by a boulder. There's been many stories of this. Obviously, they're anecdotal. Someone trapped by a boulder and they press the boulder off. Okay. Did that person go to the gym and do a 6-month bench cycle to press a 1,000-pound boulder off?
No.
No chance. Now, everyone's screaming at me in the comments or listening to this podcast saying, well, that's just adrenaline. Adrenaline is a hormone released by the body to accomplish something at the behoove of the central nervous system, the governor, the entity, right? Now, in that moment, it's survival, but what does that teach us? That the body is limiting and inhibiting strength for our own protection, and it has a reserve. And now the Russians figured that out a long time ago with absolute strength versus maximal strength. And Westside Barbell talks about the maximal strength deficit closing that gap. So what I'm talking about is there was no bench press cycle to create that strength. It was there. It was present. So I want you to think, did you guys ever grow up with curfew or anything like that?
Loosely.
We kind of grew up in the boonies, bro.
Yeah.
Oh, damn. Okay, cool. Well, I guess I was a loser. And I grew up with curfew. So when I grew up, when I was in high school, my parents were like, okay, we trust you a little bit more. You can stay out till 9 p.m. So they set a curfew. And obviously, I was generally a good kid. I didn't get into too much trouble. I was a band nerd. I played the trumpet. Shout out band nerds. And I followed the curfew. I got back, sometimes at 8, sometimes at 8:30. Now, there was a couple times I'd get back at like 8:50, 8:55, and my parents, I didn't break curfew, but what do you think my parents were doing? They're like, okay, you're pushing your limits. Okay. But for the most part, I didn't break curfew. And then eventually, after maybe a couple months, my parents were like, wow, you've respected our curfew. We trust you more. Why don't you now stay out? Your curfew is now 10 to 10:30. So they push the curfew back because of trust. Right? So then what I want you to think is, now let's take that example where all of a sudden your curfew is 10:30 and you pushed it out a little further, and then all of a sudden you miss curfew, but this time you miss it by a couple hours because you went out partying, you got some drinks, and it's 1 a.m. and you're like, oh shit, I'm way past curfew. And then you try to sneak home, and then you get in the door. I've remembered this happened back in the day. And all of a sudden you think you're good to go, and your dad's sitting on the couch, and you just have that like, that is a moment. That's a moment because, you pull I had a manual car. So I put it in clutch and rolled it into the driveway. And then dad's waiting there, and you broke curfew. Now, nothing happened. You didn't get pulled over by the cops. But what did your parents say? Hey, you broke curfew. I'm going to ground you. So what I'm getting at is, in this scenario, that curfew was moved because of trust over time. So when we stay within our limits, when we focus on progress and success in that when it comes to training, okay, I believe the central nervous system, which is limiting and inhibiting strength, will trust us more, and that will allow us to access more of the strength that it already has. Okay. So now that you're confused, I can come up with a little bit of an example if that helps.
No, that's perfect, because that's how I was wondering what that looks like. Because I
I'm
agree
not
with that.
By the way, I'm not trying to sound like the Eastern philosopher, like Nadia Aguilar, where I'm off the deep end. I think that I'll make this example with lifter A and lifter B. Okay, so let's take lifter A, and this is not saying that lifter A is doing anything wrong, terrible, evil, because I'm all about lifting heavy, hard, and doing awesome stuff. Okay, I love training to failure. I love it all. Okay, but I just want us to think differently about progressive overload, which most of progressive overload has the word progress in it, not failure. Okay. So lifter A. I'm going to take, I know that everyone doesn't do 3 sets of 10 anymore because that's so 1999 and now it's 4x8 or 5x5. But to make the math simple, let's take lifter A is going to do 3 sets of 10. Cool. Let's do something like a dumbbell chest press and their 1 rep max is 100 pounds. Okay. That makes it simple. So their 1 rep max is 100 pounds. They're going to do 3 sets of 10 at their 75% rep max. Cool. Wouldn't most strength coaches agree you'd have to be above 75, 80% of max to increase strength, correct? That's what all the research says. That's what your CSCS says. That's what your we crushed it, bro. That's not wrong, okay? Because you're stimulating the nervous system. But I want you to think, instead of stimulate the nervous system like the West Side guys or the Russians, I'm going to talk to you about a little bit like curfew theory, okay? Earning the trust of your nervous system to take off the parking brake. So lifter A is a normal person. They do 3 sets of 10, okay? First set, they do their 10 rep max, which is 75 pounds, okay? And they do a set of 10. What does that set of 10 look like? Do they get all 10 reps?
Yep.
Yeah. What's the 10th rep? They're the rep that they fail, right? Because they can't do more than 10. We're assuming that all else is equal. This is a perfect world, right? They fail on their 10th rep. So what would the RPE of that set be?
10.
Fantastic. Cool. All right. Let's say they do a normal rest and they rest 3 to 5 minutes. And they grab that weight again. Why would they do that same weight again? Because they crushed it. They were successful. And what do people have to do? They have to fail. They have to push their limits. They have to struggle, which is not wrong. But now ready, so they do their second set because we know that most people probably go up in weight because they were successful, right? But let's say they stay at 75 pounds. They go to do 10 reps again. Are they getting 10 reps?
Probably getting 9, 8.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you. If they rest 5 minutes, maybe 9, probably 8, especially if it was an honest effort. And like we said, depending on fiber type, genetics, motivation, how much pre-workout they had, right? All that. So they're 8 reps. What's the RPE of that second set?
Still 10.
It's still 10. Okay. So now we're at 18 reps at my 75% max, and both efforts have been perceived by the governor, the nervous system, as a 10 out of 10, which is in that moment. I'm not talking in the workout or in the week. I'm in that moment. It is perceived by the nervous system, by the governor, by your parents who are setting curfew as a maximal effort. Okay. We get to set 3. Are they getting 8 reps?
No.
And I know I'm loading this question. I know I'm setting the deck in my favor, but a magician's got to do that to show you his magic trick, right? The Prestige, baby. By the way, that movie is friggin' awesome. Prestige, right? Christian Bale, Hugh Jackman. That's good. Hugh Jackman. Do you know
to watch that tonight? I've never watched that.
Okay, that's pathetic. Dude, Hugh Jackman could pull like a 505 deadlift. Pretty impressive for a movie actor. But that's embarrassing. Okay, I'll keep going. Okay, so what are they getting in that third set? I'm going to argue once again 7, 6, somewhere in there. Okay, let's give them 7. So then we have what? We have basically 25 reps at 75% max, 3 sets, 10 out of 10 RPE. So what's that person thinking? They pushed their limits, they crushed it, they they did it. Mission achieved, mission impossible, mission successful. And to most people, that's cool. Okay, now let's take lifter B and let's apply a little bit of, I don't want to call it curfew theory. I don't want to be known for something that I don't have a name for. I just think about parking brakes as much as I do gas pedals. I want people to know I'm not just a parking brake dude. I'm a gas pedal guy as well. Okay. But that's easy. Pushing down gas pedal is easy when there's no parking brake on. Pretty damn easy. Okay. Lifter B. Sorry for the long example, but if this will blow your guys' mind. Okay. Lifter B. Instead of 10 sets of 3, he's going to lift at 75 pounds too. Let's have him, I'll make this up in my head right now. Let's have him do 20 sets of 3 at 75 pounds. Now, all of a sudden, I saw Tristan. He's like, wait, what the hell? 20 sets of 3? There's nowhere in my NSCA book that says 20 sets of 3, right? Okay. Now, obviously, I've stacked the deck. I'm creating a little bit of a scenario in my favor, but let's now go through this. They're lifting 75 pounds, which is their 10 rep max. Lifter B goes to chest press again. Does set 1, 2, 3 reps. What's the RPE of set number 1?
3.
Yep, because it's out of 10. Now, obviously, does lifter B have to rest as long as A? No chance in the world, because it felt like a 3 out of 10, which to most people would be a warm-up weight or somewhere in the ballpark, okay? So let's say they rest half the amount of time, 90 seconds a minute. I've done this too many times with me and my clients, so you probably do it on every minute or 90 seconds and feel like it's not, and you're fully recharged. Okay, they do set number 2 and they do another set of 3. What's the RPE?
3.
I would assume 3. Now, depending on how many times they've done this lift, how experienced they are, their gym age, their pre-workout, their fatigue levels, fiber type, you get it. Eventually, obviously, the RPE is going to go up. But what do you think the RPE is on their 20th set? It's probably an 8 or maybe a 9, or let's see if it gets to 10. Do you think they're probably hitting all 20 sets of 3?
Yeah.
If they rest appropriately and they're not like someone who has no experience, right? No experience. Okay. Let's do the math now. Let's say they end up at a 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10. I would assume it'd be probably a little bit lower, because think about it. If their first 10 sets were 3 RPE, which I bet they would be, and your final 10 sets are an 8 RPE, that would split in the middle about a 6 for the whole chest press workout, right? But I'll be fair. I'll give you an 8 out of 10 for lifter B so I don't stack the field. Okay. So lifter B completes how many reps at their 75% of max?
We got 60 in there.
60. So over double the ready? Lifter B did over double the volume and perceived it as 20 to 40% easier. Okay. Wait, let that sink in, because now people are going to be like, well, but the stimulus might have been the same in the first workout. And I'm going to agree. The stimulus was probably better in the first workout, depending on your goal, whether it be strength, hypertrophy, work capacity, whatever. Okay. So actually, stimulus in workout A is probably better in that workout. But remember, one stimulus, one workout is nothing. It means nothing. It's absolutely nothing. It's like a hurricane is not just wind blowing once. It's a continuous surge of these pulsing winds, right? Just like a tsunami, right? It's the waves that add up. Okay, so one workout means nothing. So the maximizing the stimulus of one workout and not thinking about the stimulus of the week's workouts or the month's workouts is nothing. Okay, let's flash forward. Let's Tuesday, Wednesday. Let's go to Wednesday. How sore is lifter A from that workout?
Probably pretty sore.
Probably pretty sore. Okay, let's say we do the same workout on Wednesday. What does lifter A hit? Okay, they do set number 1. How many reps are they hitting?
8, 9.
8, 9, maybe they get 10. Let's say they get 10. But what's the RPE now? A 10 out of 10. They go to set number 2. What are they getting? Probably the same thing, right? There's no way, because we know adaptations don't take place that quick. In fact, they're probably now fatigued from Monday. So let's say they get the same reps. Now, after 2 days of training, Monday, Wednesday, they've gotten 50 reps at 75% of the rep max. And what has every set been in the moment to the governor, to the central nervous system?
10.
A 10 out of 10 max effort. In the moment, not in the grand scheme, because I understand it's not the exact equivalent. Okay. All right. Lifter B. Yes, both would probably be sore if this is a new thing, but lifter B theoretically would be less sore, maybe depending on the volume already. I know the big thing right now is the calcium damage. Everyone's all talking about calcium now. Lifter B goes to do that same workout. Can they do 20 sets of 3 again?
Probably.
Would it be easier or harder than the previous workout? Probably about the same, right? But now, are they getting those 60 reps again? Yeah. So now, ready? How many reps are we after 2 workouts? 120 versus 50. Do you guys get where I'm starting to go with this? Lifter B. Who has more room to progressively overload? Lifter A or lifter B?
B.
B. Who is going to probably feel less burnt out at the end of 8 weeks, 12 weeks?
B.
B. Who can keep progressing in manipulating volume, intensity, density for weeks, months, and years because they're letting their nervous system move their limits as they build them inside their limits by focusing on adaptations, not demonstrations of strength via an output of the nervous system. So here's what I want you to think. Who's probably going to start? Lifter A, probably 6 weeks down the road, is probably going to go up in weight. And is it going to be harder or easier?
Harder.
It is, which is still a 10 out of 10. So now here's what I want you to picture. We're 4 weeks down the road. Lifter A has been smashing their face into the wall and they're successful. And it works. Because why? The central nervous system, the human body, is adapt or die. So the adapt or die response will work for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 6 months, depending on if they're a new lifter or not. But then what happens? Stagnation, right? Neurological stagnation, which is biological accommodation. Because why? They've been slamming their face into the wall and there's no room to progressively overload anymore. So what happens with lifter B? Do you think they could be now doing 20 sets of 5 at their former 10 rep max? Yeah, because they could have done that on what? The first workout. Now where are they at if they're at 20 sets of 5? They're an absolute monster. They're doing 3 times as much volume and it's perceived by their nervous system to be 20 to 40% easier. Now here's what I want you to think. Lifter A increases the weight and it feels harder, if not harder, and it's more stressful. Lifter B is doing 20 sets of 5 and now says, I'm going to do 10 sets of 4 at my 90 rep max or 90% of rep max. Is it easier or harder when they go to 10 sets of 4 at 90%?
Easier.
Because they just traded like, what is it, 20 to 50 reps? They made a deal with the devil. They made a deal with it, ready? So that person can now make a deal with the devil, which is the central nervous system, and say, hey, ready? I'll give you 50 reps of volume if you let me go up 20 pounds in weight. And guess what happens when you do that? You go up in weight and it feels easier. That's called progressive overload because you had a disproportional increase in intensity in RPE.
You just made like the best advertisement ever for Jake Tura's hypertrophy clusters right there.
Dude, he stole them from me. Okay. Okay. What was funny is Jake and I, like, I don't know, Jake. Oh, I hadn't known specifically how his hypertrophy clusters worked, and then he and I were just talking, and I was like, the same philosophy is driving that success of that program for him, I believe. And it doesn't mean that it's what I'm describing doesn't mean you're not training hard and it's not hard and that it's easy and you're just chilling in a sauna. The whole point is, ready? If you do a set of 20 back squats, you know, the 1x20 method, like by Dr. Yesus or whatever. If you do one set of 20 of a back squat at 225 and you could do 10 more reps, would that feel hard as shit? Yeah. Yeah. Your legs would be blown up. But since you can do 10 more, what technically is that compared to your max? It's not that high percentage-wise, right? So just because it's easy is relative, hard is relative. It doesn't matter whether it's easy, medium, hard, or hard as hell. It's all about progressive overload. So that doesn't mean we don't train hard. There has to be direction and everything has to head towards a peak. But what they say in cardio training is what? The wider the base, the higher the peak. So if my 10 rep max, which was 75 pounds in that example, was 75 pounds for 10, if I can now press 75 pounds for 20, is it my 10 rep max anymore?
Nope.
Okay. Then is my 8 rep max my 8 rep max anymore?
Nope.
Is my 6 rep my 6 rep? No. My 5 rep? No, because a rising tide raises all ships. That is now, obviously, because of the nervous system and because of fast twitch fibers and neuromuscular coordination, you're going to probably gain plus or minus 20% of the rep percentage you're working at. So you would still have to peak. But the whole point is the peak is going to be there if the base is there. But if the base is there, you can get to the peak, but you can't stay up there that long. Or if you get there, it's going to cost you. And then all of a sudden, now you're rehabbing your shitty hip and knee for 8 months. When imagine what you could have done if you could have just been training during that 8 months. That doesn't mean don't train hard. It just means think differently. And maybe that your parking brake is going to give you more progress than the gas pedal, even though I'm not telling people to take off the gas pedal. That would be the dumbest thing in the world. Hey, just start doing these mobility drills and stop lifting. That's stupid. Right?
But that's like the balance that you found. It's like there's so many people that run their faces into the wall that now there is a spot in the market for people saying, you don't ever have to do that. You don't ever have to lift. You just have to do this mobility stuff because people are so driven into the wall. You know what I mean? Where you're talking about like on the front end, just taking care of it on the front end, not getting to that point.
It's not a war between the two. I think, all the other legends in the mobility industry, stretching industry always say what? Mobility, strength training is mobility. Like it's not a war, but here's the point is I don't even like thinking of as like mobility training. It's like unshitifying training. Like it's just strength training in a particular area where you suck. Like that's mobility training. Like the second you call it mobility, people like either A are like, it's the best thing ever, or B, they're like, avoid it like the devil. It's like the whole point is the less shitty your joints are, the more you can lift. The more you can lift, the more strength you can gain via the trust of the nervous system. And then you can take that strength that the nervous system grants you like a curfew, right? Your parents say, now you can stay up till midnight. So your nervous system allots you more strength because remember, the nervous system is holding back so much strength that you don't understand. It's holding back. It's putting the parking brake on. They show that even when Olympians are lifting at like the rep maxes, they're only innervating like 50 to 60% of their motor units, right? So the parking brake's on. So it's like one of those things where like, if I do all this, like say I've got shitty hips and I do mobility training, it's not taking away from your lifting. It's going to make your lifting better so you can do more work lifting and then you get stronger and then you use that strength to unshitify more areas, right?
Well, and one of the main principles, though, that you're touching on, too, that is kind of thrown out the window, especially in the American strength training world, is like it's a long-term athletic development model, And now you have kids in high school running a full-on 1 rep max, like triphasic type program, their first time lifting because they need to get progress within a year, right? And it's like, man, you are fucking this up. And the amount of times, dude, that I see an athlete start a program with one season in mind and then they stay the same athlete for 4 years because they fuck up that model. And they, like you said, there's so much room for growth if you just slow cook it and you approach it in that way, but they all want the results instantly. And it's like, you're still going to get results. It's not that you're not going to get results. You're still going to get results, but you're just going to continue to get the results rather than like getting a 10% result and then running into some roadblock.
Well, and I want to make sure people like, you do need to test your limits. You do need to push your limits. There are times and places, right? A fire in the context of a fireplace is awesome. You make some s'mores, you have some beers, you get around the fire. It's the best thing ever. But if you have a fire in a dry forest, depending on where it is, and if you're aware of it, it could get out of hand, right? So I always use this example. Like most people are treating their training like a farmer who goes and plants like, I don't know, like potatoes or carrots, right? Carrots, I don't know, something, right? A crop that goes under the ground. Imagine you go and do all this hard work to just get the field ready, right? It's not sexy. You're doing till in the field. Then you start planting all the seeds, planting all the crops. And then the crops are there. That was a lot of work. That's like the base building, right? That's like the foundation building. That's all the not sexy mobility work. That's all the not sexy technique work and all the stuff, right? All the hypertrophy work. And then all of a sudden I want you to picture this farmer after a week starts watering the water. And then all of a sudden they sit there and they're like, they grab a shovel and they start digging up all the crops. And they're like, oh, well, I just got to see if it's growing.
Yeah.
Like, wait, what? And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, it's growing. And then they cover it back up again. And then they cover it back up again and they retill the field. And then they start watering. And then another week later, they're like, pull the crops up. And they're like, okay, it's bigger. It's like, hey, like, of course I want your crops to grow. Of course I want you success and progress. But there needs to be time, work put in. There needs to be work put in over time with lots of energy in the right direction, in the right specific adaptations, right? But it's like you got to trust the process. You've got to trust that if you increase volume or increase intensity or increase density, it doesn't have to be you don't have to be aggressively overloading to create progressively overload, right? So if a workout is easy, awesome. If a workout is medium, awesome. If a workout's hard as hell, awesome. But people are artificially just trying to fatigue and fail and make their workouts hard to see where they're at in space. Now, once again, we're humans. We need to know where we're at. We need to feel progress. We need that. So every once in a while and in the right situations, it's fine. But people are doing this like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. In the course of an 8-week training block, they've spent 50% of their sessions testing their limits versus 50% expanding the limits. And I know some people hate that phrase, but you guys can hopefully hear how I'm saying it with tact and with purpose. Because the whole point is this. Here's my philosophy. If I spend a workout maxing out, that's at least 3 workouts I could have spent raising my limits. So when I go into the gym, I ask this question. And it's a question that I answer honestly. Am I here to test and express my limits? And a lot of the times the answer is yeah. Because guess what? I'm a human. Also, I want to do cool stuff. Also, I want to post cool shit on Instagram. Yeah, cool. Right? And that's good for my mental health. That's good for being a human. That's great. But if all of a sudden I have a 12-week training block and 50% of it's testing and expressing, that means that I could have spent 40% of that 50 expanding my limits and gaining capacities I don't have. So I always ask myself, am I here to test myself or am I here to express and expand myself? And all I know is that generally I continue to get stronger, faster, better when I push the needle a little bit more towards expand my limits more than test. Most people in the gym, it's like 80% test your limits, 20% expand by the way they're going about business.
Yeah, dude.
I just say, hey, if you max out on Monday, and notice how when I said max out, that wasn't a 1-rep max. So if you do a 1-rep max, that's sticking within curfew, right? Because what's the rule of a 1-rep max? You do it once. So if you're doing like a Bulgarian method training max, that's totally fine because you're dealing with volume. What are people doing? They're taking set 1 to 10 out of 10 RPE. Then they're doing it again, doing it again, doing it again. And what do they do once they get done with their bench press? They do the same thing with their dumbbell chest press, same thing with their dumbbell chest press, then the same thing with chest flies and same thing with push-ups. Now, if you're training for the Olympia and trying to tack on every inch of fiber possible with hypertrophy, that works. But what I'm getting at is, are you here to expand your limits or are you here to test them? If it's testing day, let's break out the AC/DC and get to work, right? Let's bust out Katy Perry Roar. It's game time, right? Or Creed. It's Creed, higher. But if it's expand our limits, we just have to have a different context of what we're going to do in that session. And that's just all about intent.
Dude, and I love how you lay out like what the day and what the stimulus of that day and what the goal of that day is. And that like having that in your program is so powerful. And that was a question that I had is like, what does like a day or a week like practically look like in that setting when you're programming for somebody? Like, how do you balance the gas with the brakes? Like, do you have like philosophical buckets that you're like, okay, this is a gas exercise, this is a brake exercise, or this is a gas day, this is a brake day, to make sure you're staying within a system? You know what I mean? Because like, again, if there is no system, it's going to turn into 80-20. Like it will. Like it's going to turn into that. So how do you balance that to where you know and you're communicating that with your athletes more so? Because like you have that knowledge, but when you're working with an athlete, to like, hey, this is a break day. This is the day when we get rid of that break. This is a building day. This is the day that we're doing that. Or parts of these exercises. This exercise is a removing the break day. And these exercises are gas days. And so they know that intent. They know that stimulus that you're trying to get out of them.
I think that's where this is the fun of programming and the fun of coaching, because there are no rules. There's just guidelines, just like Pirates of the Caribbean. Um, I think that sharing it with your clients or telling it, like I said, I'm not like hard. Like some of my clients, I don't even talk about this stuff because they don't need it, right? That's where learning how to be a real world coach versus a textbook coach or a LinkedIn LinkedIn thought leader or whatever they call them. It's like you learn how to be a real person and say, okay, this person can handle knowing, this person can't. This person needs to know, this person shouldn't know, right? So with that, obviously everyone rips off the conjugate system, but the conjugate system was max effort, dynamic day, repetition day, and stuff like that. Here's what I want you to think. I almost categorize it two things: parking brake or that, but another way you can think of this. So we have normal lifts that everyone loves, that they want to do or that are required for their sport or required for their success. The lifts, okay? Gas pedal, because lifts are all about gas pedal, right? And then we have the parking brakes or the adaptations on the stuff that makes up the lift, right? Because think about it. A squat doesn't exist without joints, without muscle, without the nervous system, right? Dynamically creating the squat, right? Ever changing in terms of its kinematics and kinetics, right? So what I want you to think is a squat is something we made up. It's an entity. It doesn't exist. And now people are gonna clip it. Dude, people are gonna clip that and be like, he's out of his mind. The whole point is a squat is made up. Like you can't squat without a hip, but I can hip without a squat, because the squat demands a hip, and a squat demands a knee, and a squat demands tibial rotation and pronation, right? I'm the knees forward guy. Knees forward versus knees out, everyone. Whoop, whoop. If you want to build quads, knees forward. It also demands that the connective tissue, right? We have range of motion and length, right? It also demands that you have the muscles and the nervous system. So what I'm getting at is the way to think about it is it can happen within a session, just like the conjugate method where you train for multiple qualities at once. You can train for parking brakes and gas pedals in the same session. Now, you could do it like bro split. You could do parking brake, gas pedal, parking brake, gas pedal, almost like Charlie Francis, high, low, high, low. I like to just do in the same session. So here's an example. So we have the entity, which is the squat. Who's in charge of the squat? Not you, the central nervous system, okay, the governor. So I want to make sure when I go make a deal with the devil, the central nervous system, in the squat, that I've done my due diligence to make a good offer, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is, before I approach the squat, I'm going to say, okay, what are the parking brakes on my squat that are going to limit, inhibit, or decrease the trust of my nervous system? And guess what? We don't accomplish that via foam rolling, dry needling, scraping, taping, and all that stuff. There's nothing wrong with that, but we have to do it versus good old-fashioned strength training and hard work, right? We have to hit intensity to achieve adaptations. So then what I want you to think is I try to remove as many parking brakes as possible, and I tell this with the people I'm working with, and I say, okay, now when you squat, there's three things you have to fight when you squat, okay? Gravity, the weight you put on your back, and then your body and your nervous system. You could argue the same or different entities, maybe four. So here's the cool thing. I tell people, hey, instead of just squatting, instead of fighting three opponents, you now only have to fight two. Because you were about to squat, you were about to fight your nervous system or your body, right? You could say joints, whatever, right? If someone's got shitty knees, so if someone can't internally rotate their tibia or whatever. But now your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to only fight gravity and the weight. That's freaking awesome. So now you can progress further in the squat and do more because you're not limited. And then you go gas pedal. And like you said, if it's shown go time, say it's 1 rep max, say, okay, we're gonna see what the nervous system can put out and compress in 1 rep, which would be like a training max, right? I think you do that all the right. You're crushing. Did you hit just a 250 snatch the other day?
Yeah, it was pretty ugly, but we got it, baby.
We got it, baby. That right there, fantastic. Now you're saying I'm going to amalgamate all my adaptations and I'm going to see if the nervous system can compress that into 1 rep. That's freaking great. We need that, right? But what I'm getting at is, what I show people is why I do that is that when they get in the squat and they're like, holy hell, this is the best my squat's ever felt. And then once they learn that they don't have to punch themselves in the face for 7 to 10 sets to get progress, and they just realize, oh, it's about volume, intensity, density, and manipulating the numbers, then all of a sudden they realize, oh, this mobility stuff is actually important because it makes my other stuff important. I'm not talking doing like a dynamic warm-up. I'm talking they're like, wow, like I've never felt my hips as much as I do when I squat versus my back. So I like to think of it as conjugate in the session and then conjugate throughout the week. It's just instead of thinking exercises, it's about adaptations.
Dude, that's spot on too. Exactly, like kind of everything we've been realizing the last couple of years. So specifically with the spine, man, like implementing some sort of spinal movement with some sort of our compression type movement, and that's how we kind of think about it in a very similar way. It is wild how much more these athletes can do with way less just feeling like absolute dog water after that gas pedal session. Like it is crazy. It is, and it's such like you show some of this stuff, and everybody's like, you're wasting fucking time. You're like doing all this stuff. It's like, dude, it took 5 to 10 minutes to do this stuff. They feel way better. They're way less sore, and they're moving more weight at a better, like it looks better. It feels better for them. Like, what are we talking about, man? It's such a crazy, like, there's so many people are just unwilling to take one step out of their comfort zone of the same lifts, doing it over and over again in the same program and doing it over and over again to do some of this out there in quotation stuff, which is literally just looking at what the limiting factor is for that athlete and like spending just a little bit of time on that and then letting them go back to the thing, like you said, focusing on that gas pedal again. And it's so much better. It's crazy. It's with very little effort and very little time put into it.
Dude, it's the freaking hard. It's the hardest training out there. And that's why, like, I don't like the word mobility. I don't like range of motion training. It's just training to me. Mm-hmm. It's just training the stuff that you're not training because, like, you know, if you plant a garden, I don't have one, but it's like you don't have to plant weeds. They're gonna grow. So, like, we know via thermodynamics that entropy is gonna act, right? So training is a weapon against entropy because we're using energy to do training work, to funnel into certain tissues, to create certain adaptations, to specifically gain and progress, right? So the problem is you have, obviously it depends on if we're training an athlete or an everyday person, right? But athletes have their sport. That's where they're practicing, right? But lifting is not about practicing unless practicing is your sport, meaning like if you're a power lifter, you need to practice, right? You need it's all about practice and technique if you're a power lifter, an Olympic lifter, or anything like that. But it's like, hold up now. You're combating entropy, which is taking everything from order to disorder, right? And the only way to take the time machine back, like Back to the Future, is to do training work. So the problem is if we get lost, if all we do is gas pedal movement patterns, right? Which is where most of your gas pedal work is going to be, is in a movement pattern, you know, like a hang clean, an RDL, whatever, a bench press, right? Because it's easy. That's where we thrive doing gas pedal work, is in these big pattern movements. But the problem is you start confining yourself to these pattern movements. What you're doing is you're accelerating entropy here, right? Because we're starting to reuse the same tissues over and over again, and there's only finite ability to adapt and to recover, right? Especially if you're constantly at a 10 out of 10, training your limits, pushing your limits, and that. Imagine if we did what people do in strength training and cardio. Ready? Every run is a 10 out of 10 as hard as possible. There's no way. Tristan, you know what I'm talking about. You're like an elite pro level cyclist. Why do people spend so much of their time at low intensity? Because you just can't. You can't do 15 hours, 20 hours a week of riding and be at zone 4, zone 5 redlining. But now all of a sudden people are redlining in every set of every lift, and they're like, why am I getting blown up? It's because they're accelerating entropy in those specific tissues that are in that specific pattern that the internet said is a movement pattern, squat, hinge, push, pull. And then all the other tissues that are in rotate, laterally bend, flex, Jefferson curl, medicine ball chop, back bend. You guys get what I'm talking about. Those are not being maintained. And if we don't train to maintain or train to gain, that is slowly lost over time. So it's just like anything. A picture, you have a big ranch, like a huge cattle ranch. If you never go to the perimeter, you have no idea that your fence has been knocked over, or has fallen down or has broken, right? You would have to go to the perimeter to know if your fence is still up, right? The storms come in, blow it over. That's why end range of training, which is called mobility training, in training areas where you're weak or can't move or have parking breaks is so important, because you don't know what you don't know. And if you can't move where you can't move, well, what happens when you can't move in an area? There's no progressive overload there, which if there's no progress, there's regress, because the only choice in life is to progress or regress. You get to choose. Athletical skills or hospital bills. Athletic skills, baby.
Hell yeah, dude.
Spike ball. Spike ball. By the way, I will stand by this till I die. The greatest word on the planet is the game of spike ball. I will fight anyone in strength conditioning who says that there's a better warm up than spike ball.
You and Grant Fowler are about to go at it there.
Yeah.
One of the things specifically I want to take you down, and I know we're kind of running long. Sorry for this, but I really wanted to hear your dive. I want a masterclass on shin splints, because dude, every time I post a Q&A, I probably get 17 people ask about shin splints. You had a ton of stuff on your page about shin splints, and you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to send them all to you, and I'm going to send them all to this podcast. So when you have somebody with a break on, when you have somebody with these shin splints going, what's your masterclass approach to getting rid of these shin splints or preventing them in the first place?
Yeah, man. If there was a magic one-liner answer that we could put on a 30-second reel, I'd be rich, and I'd be there. I would not be even working right now, because shin splints have plagued people for forever, right? Probably even back in the day, I picture like the cavemen being like, "I know, bro. I don't know if I can chase the mammoth today."
Dude, I've honestly thought about that. Like the army's marching. I was like, bro, like what happens if somebody gets a shin splint? They just fucking gimping through that entire march. Like what's going on there?
Bro,
Yeah,
people quit. That's why some of the selections are so nasty. Like one of the highest tier selections, it's literally marching 30 to 50 miles a day for 3 weeks, and people just don't make it.
Like a
They
standard.
quit.
Oh, sorry about that, Tristan. Sorry. Yeah, a standard selection, you're going to be on feet about, depends on the selection, right? SEALs is different than Green Beret, which is different than, they're all different, but about 25 miles during your hell week or like your intense phase, 25 miles per day with, ruck, which can be anywhere between 40 and 100, 120 pounds, weapons, and then you're obviously getting destroyed. But shin splints, I spend a lot of time training guys for selection in the military. So it's probably the number one injury. And, first off, let's get this out here. Shin splints is what everyone calls it, but it's super frustrating, because when I hear shin splints, it doesn't really tell me much, because shin splints could be pain in the front of the shin. It could be pain in the back of the shin. And there's other muscles in the shin besides the tib. I know, unfortunately and fortunately, that the knees over toes influence has helped people get out of pain, but also it's created this obsession with the tibs, which is kind of crazy. So what we need to know is shin splints is a lazy term. It's meaningless to someone who is like me, who's a run coach or a strength coach, because it doesn't help us pinpoint where the pain is, because we have anterior shin splints, which is pain on the front, and then we have posterior shin splints, which is pain on the inside back. And it's important to know the difference between the two, because we have sites where shin splints is technically a bone stress injury, okay? It's a bone issue at the end of the day, which means we need a bone solution. Just like Dr. Seuss, I'm going to make this rhyme. Different tissues have different issues in the body, so we need different solutions. What helps build a tendon, which might be a heavy isometric, is going to not really build the bone. This is why people get into trouble, okay? So someone starts getting shin splints, which is generally a bone stress issue, and they select a tib raise, which is a muscular strategy. Now, if they're having pain in their shin because it's a muscular issue, they'll do tib raises, and then they'll be like, I feel better. But the problem is, the big thing you have to understand about shin splints is, the first thing is we have to differentiate between shin splints and stress fractures. This is crazy important, because the difference between the two is, if you have a fracture, which is an actual like crack or break, right? You cannot run through it. Now, yes, of course, if you're in selection, you have to do what you have to do and not quit. But here's the deal. If it's an actual fracture, we need to get it ruled out. So a lot of people are going to be like, I don't know if it's shin splints or a fracture. The most important thing is to know about how big the pain is in terms of how long it is on the shin. So what I call the first thing to do is what's called the key test. Okay. So, like a house key that's about like yay high, like, 2 inches or so, or 5 centimeters. Wherever the pain is, you're going to take a key or take a ruler and you're going to see if the pain travels greater than like 5 centimeters or the shape of a house key. If the pain is concentrated in an area that's smaller than a house key, it doesn't mean you have a stress fracture, but it's more than like it's starting to tip the scale that direction. Cool? It's super important that we know this. So if the pain is sharp and it's concentrated, now say you have pain and it's on the inside of your shin, but it's greater than 5 centimeters, it's kind of along the whole thing, that's more leaning towards shin splints. This is super important because once again, if we start to have positive signs, you need to get an MRI to rule it out, because if you run through a bone stress injury, it's just going to set you back 6 months, a year, or later, depending on where it's at. So test number one is like the key test. You actually want to palpate and feel to see how long the pain goes. Number two is going to be a hop test. I know you guys are all about plyos, right? If you do single leg hopping, it is very good at ruling in the potential of a stress fracture. So if you do 10 to 20 aggressive single leg hops in place and you have pain in that concentrated area, not necessarily a fracture, but it's tipping the scale. You guys get what I'm going for? Now, there's going to be arguments and disagreements about the next two, but bone generally doesn't warm up, even though in some cases it will. So meaning if you start running and then your pain goes from like a 4 out of 10 to 6 out of 10 to an 8 out of 10 by the time you're running or getting to the end of your run, potentially a bone stress injury. If it's throbbing, shitty, and tight and doesn't feel all right, like you'll feel almost like your calf is getting like pumped out, or like little like it's like pumped out almost like you did a bunch of calf raises, that's another sign. If it just feels not right. And then the biggest thing is you'll have people like doctors will say, oh, just get an x-ray. If you have 5 categories of stress fractures, okay? Like 5 is like the bone's broken like in half. 1 is like a stress reaction. 2 is like, it's getting worse. 3, it's like, this is almost a crack. A grade 4 stress fracture, you have a crack. Grades 1 through 3 generally won't show up on an x-ray. That's a big thing to know. So you could still have a bone stress injury. You go to urgent care, you get it, you get an x-ray and it says what? You're all good to go. That's why if you have all those telltale signs, so if you wake up in the middle of the night and you feel throbbing, if your calves are constantly super painful, because bone follows muscle. So if the muscle can't keep up with your running demands, the bone can't keep up either, because the bone's slower than the muscle at adapting. So this is super important, because if you have a bone stress injury, can you guys run on it? Or nope. Should you? No. So we have to know shin splints versus stress fracture. So if you have painful single leg hops, if it's smaller than a key, if it's throbbing, if you're getting like this weird swelling in your calf, if the pain gets worse in a run, if it feels throbbing at night and shitty tight and not all right, you need to go get an MRI to rule it out. Okay? That is important, because if not, you got to get off your feet and go no impact. So I had to say that because I have to do my due diligence. Apologies. Okay, shin splints. Now what do we do with shin splints? Because everyone's solution is going to be, oh, you've just got tight calves, stretch them. That's not the end of the world. Or do your tib raises. Okay, here's what we need to know. What is shin splints? What is it? Well, we don't know exactly what it is, but what we think it's this imbalance between bone damage, which every time we do something, we're going to cause all these micro damages or cracks in the bone. They're very small, minuscule cracks. And your bone is constantly breaking down and building up. So that's important, because what's happening with your muscles every day? Breaking down and building up. So people don't freak out. Every single day, your muscles are breaking down and building up. Some of you breaking down more than others. Paul Carter. So there's this balance. You have these things called osteoclasts. So when you get damage in your bone, or when you use your bone, which is a great thing, you're going to cause small micro damage. Now I want you to picture if you have a bunch of potholes in your road in your neighborhood. The first thing that has to happen is you have to have a construction crew come in and kind of scrape and clean out the road, so it's a nice level flat surface to build a new road on. Those are the osteoclasts. Those guys come in and they kind of create these channels, which are called Haverson canals. basically they smooth out the bone so it's ready for new bone to get formed, which is really cool. And the osteoblasts are like the Bob the Builders. They come in and lay down new bone, which bone is super slow. It normally has a lag time of like 21 days before it can fill out new bone. That's why generally you're going to hear the recommendation of every three weeks of running, just kind of decrease your volume a little bit so bone can catch up. But what we're seeing is with shin splints, in a nutshell, it's an inability to handle collisions with the ground. Because what is running? It's just collisions with the ground. It's like a series of single leg bounds, right? That's all running is a series of single leg bounds. So here's what you need to know. Shin splints is not your tibs. It's your body's inability to collide with the ground, and it's an imbalance of breakdown and build with the bone. So now that leads us to, well, why does just doing tib raises not really help us? Okay, because that's a muscular solution. Okay, when it comes to building bones, bones love a couple things. Number one, they love high strain activities. What is strain? Strain is when something goes to length, but in bones, it's where they're going to bend. So when a bone is bending, that bone is gaining. Okay, so we got to bend them bones, bands that make her dance, right? So that's really important because Wolff's Law, which is a law, teaches us that bone gets stronger based on the demands we place upon it. So if we're not impacting the bones, they're getting weaker. What happens to astronauts in space?
Shrivel,
atrophy, bone density goes down. So here's what we know. Impact is great for us. But the challenge of impact is when we do high amounts of volume, like in running, the bone has a hard time keeping up. And what do most people do? Do they build the base and do they progress? No, they don't build the base and they aggressively overload just like they do lifting, and their bones can't keep up with the demands. So what we have to understand is running challenges your bones. And if you've never run before, it can build some form of bone density, but running is actually a terrible activity for making your bones stronger, faster, better. In fact, runners actually have almost as bad as bone density as cyclists and swimmers, who have some of the worst. Swimmers and cyclists sometimes have worse bone density than sedentary people because of the high energy demands of their sport. So we need high strain rate. Now, what does high strain rate mean? It means we need to put a lot of force through the bone very quickly, and it needs to be something that matches or exceeds the demands of running. When we run, generally it's going to be around 2 to 3 times body weight when we run, but the tibia is going to experience anywhere between like 6 to 8 times of the bending force. So the only thing that is going to do that is not a single leg calf raise. It's not a single leg tib raise. In fact, the tibs when we run, the tibialis muscle, the tibialis anterior, which everyone's obsessed with, and it's not wrong to train, only absorbs around 0.8 times body weight when we run. Guess what the calves do? 2 to 3 times body weight. Guess what the soleus does for running? How much it absorbs?
10.
Close, 6 to 8. So like 750% more force. So when it comes to the king of the castle, there's no more important muscle, because if you cut your posterior tibialis, it's going to be a shitty day. But people are obsessed with getting the tibs stronger, which only can do 0.8 times body weight. They don't really do much. The tibs will help relatively decelerate pronation, but they'll eccentrically do dorsiflexion. They don't have much of a role in gait unless you're like running downhill. The tibs the soleus does 750% more work than the tibs. So that's an important thing to understand. But here's the deal. Even if you do single leg calf raises for the soleus, because we know single leg calf raises would train the soleus too, that is less of a demand when it comes to bending bone than walking for the tibia. So what do you see people do when they have shin splints? They stop running, which is decrease the demands. And what do they start doing? Tib raises and body weight calf raises. So what's happening to the demands on their bone? Decreasing. So what are they becoming? An astronaut on Earth. Astronaut in the ocean now. Right? So what they're doing is they're going to bike, they're going to swim, and they're going to do no impact, and then they're going to remove impact. And what's happening to the bone? It's getting weaker, 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 right? Because the only thing that is going to strain the bone as much as we run or more is plyometrics. Plyometrics are going to put well over a 7-minute mile of strain into the bone. Sometimes when you do a single leg forward hop in a row, that is the equivalent of like running a 5 or 6-minute mile, which is freaking awesome because most people aren't running that. So what does that mean? That exceeds the demands, which means it will better prepare you for the demands. So we need high strain rate, which means we need a ton of force, not just a single leg calf raise. Then we need it to happen very quickly. So when we run, the average person is going to spend around 250 to 300 milliseconds on the ground. What happens when you do something like a slow eccentric calf raise? 4 seconds down. That's 16 times slower than the amount of time you're spending on the ground. So even though it might be great for the muscle, it's not going to stimulate the bone that much. So plyometrics are the only thing that we can get where we get fast enough. Now, your goal when you do plyometrics should be to do them as fast as possible. We know Usain Bolt would spend about 80 milliseconds on the ground, which is disgusting if you think about that. I mean, that is disgusting. And most people can't do plyos that fast, but your goal should be to try to do them as fast as possible, almost like you're trying to do the NFL Combine. So high strain rate applied very quickly. And then what we also know about bone is it doesn't like volume. So what I mean by that is we can do plyometrics and it only takes about 30 to 40 to 50 impacts to stimulate the osteocytes, which are the cells in bones that are mechanosensitive, that are going to tell the bone to get stronger, faster, better. So if you're trying to build bone density to get rid of shin splints, how many hops do you need in a session? 30, 40, 50. And then what? You've stimulated adaptation and then it's time to rest up or go to your other training. Okay, so here's the point. What is the only thing that is going to be sufficient for improving our collisions with the ground? Plyometrics. Plyometrics are great because we get the same, if not greater, force and strain and impact through the bone than we do running, but we don't get the volume, right? Running is not bad for your bones. It's just most people don't fuel enough and don't progress smartly, and then they do too much too soon. And that's why runners get injured. There's this like fake 80% rule where 80% of the runners spend 80% of their time injured because they spend 80% of their runs running at 80% of their max. It's this fake thing to just say people just can't select. People are bad about using the exercise of like exercising restraint, right? It's really tough running. So now I need to caveat this with the muscle. Because people are going to be like, well, but when we train muscle, isn't it good for the bone? And the answer is yes. We know strength training and building muscle, bone will follow muscle. So if the muscle's getting stronger, faster, better, bigger, it's going to generally favor the bone. So here's the rule. Plyometrics is very stressful on the tendons. As we know, shout out Jake Tura, shout out Jake. Plyometrics is stressful on the tendon in a good way, but it doesn't build the tendons in terms of its morphological structure. So why do we need to do a lot of strength training of the calf and soleus and the posterior tib and the foot muscles? It's so you can do more plyometrics. So ready? We want to do high-level strength training or hypertrophy work with the soleus and the calf and the post tib and all the muscles of the foot. We won't pick favorites, even though the soleus is mine, right? Because it does 6 to 8 times body weight versus 0.8 of the tibs. We do that so our body can handle more plyometric impact throughout the week. Then we do more plyos so we can build our bone frequently. And the crazy thing about bone, it's a lot like connective tissue. You know how tendons can generally be loaded about once every 8 hours and they can handle another stimulus? So that's why often people will do isos twice a day when they're struggling with a tendinopathy. Bones are going to, I think it's about 90% of their mechanosensitivity is returned after about 4 to 6 hours. Damn. Meaning if you have shin splints, and you're dropping your mileage, which is decreasing demands. So if I decrease my demands running, I need to increase my demands doing what?
Plyos.
And
intensity.
And the stuff that plyos require. So remember how we talked about the lift and the stuff that makes up the lift? The plyometric is like an entity just like the squat. It requires things. It requires an Achilles. It requires a calf. So we don't want to just start spamming a bunch of plyos when we have shin splints because why? You might not have the muscle or the connective tissue or the tendon health to handle that. So you might just start spamming a bunch of single leg plyos, and then what happens to your Achilles tendon? Blows up, right? So we need both is the answer. But if I decrease the demands running, which is volume, intensity, and impact on my shins and bones, I need to do what? Increase the bejesus out of the demands in the strength training, in the plyometrics, right? That's why to even see a stimulus for like a single leg isometric, you need to be at like 1.2 times body weight, because it's just, your running is just so stressful. It doesn't mean that calf raises are a waste of time. That's a stupid argument, because you're building the qualities, the behaviors, and the tissues that you can use in plyometrics. But people need to understand, shin splints is an inability to deal with collisions with the ground. So you need a bone solution for a bone problem. And a bone problem can only be solved with plyometrics and good level strength training. But strength training can only get you so far, because doing a double bodyweight squat is still less of a demand on the bones than running. It's only going to be in your single leg plyometrics that exceed the demands of running. And the final part is, just like tendons, people give up too early, and I'll call it end on this. So bone generally takes 6 months or longer to build. What do most people do when they have a tendon issue or a bone issue? They stop doing the stuff that's making them better after 6 to 8 weeks, or after pain goes away or decreases. So here's what I see with most people. 1 out of every 3 runners will re-experience shin splints in a year after having them. So your greatest predictor of injury is you've had the injury before. And what people do is they start doing some plyos or some isos, and then after 6 weeks, they just start ramping up their running again and then abandon all that other stuff. You just can't. That's the base of the pyramid. So that was a mouthful, but hopefully that was a big chunk. But most people's solution is that, well, I've got this bone issue. I'm going to just do tib raises to hypertrophy the tibialis, which only deals with 0.8 times body weight. It's like you're going to deal with like 12,000 more % force with a single leg 4 hop. I just made up that number, but it sounds really scientific.
No, dude. That was the masterclass we were looking at. When you're working with somebody with these shin splints, what does a like practical program look like? Are you having them do the plyometrics every day? Are you having them do it twice a day? How are you predicting or adjusting how their like tendons and ligaments are going to hold up to those plyos to be able to get that repetition in, to get that bone density there? Like, how are you balancing that? How are you working with somebody specifically with these shin splints?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where, to make it easy, right? We've got to temporarily modify demands so that we're kind of pissing off the shins less. So ready? Some simple tips are, if you're running like in a 0 drop shoe, that's going to place more stress. Okay, so here's the rule. Easy rule for everyone. Whatever places more stress on the plantar flexors, which are your calves and soleus, is going to increase bending of the bone. So when your calf and soleus contract, it bends the tibia, which is a great thing. So where plantar flexor forces go, so does the tibia. Meaning, when we've got shin splints, we need to think, how do we ease up the demands on the plantar flexors when we run? That means modify. That doesn't mean remove. Okay? Remember, the only time you remove running is if you have a stress fracture. If you have shin splints, we can still navigate our way through. So if you're running in a 0 drop shoe, that is going to put you in more dorsiflexion, which means more strain on the plantar flexors. So generally, you would want to start running temporarily if you have the financial means and the ability. So say you're running in a 0 drop shoe. You'd want to get a heel drop like 6, 8 millimeters, because it's going to decrease the demand on the plantar flexors. Number 2, the thing that's going to increase the demand on the plantar flexors also is speed work. So the faster you run, the more work the soleus is going to do, the more work the Achilles is going to do, the more it's going to strain the bone. So say you're doing a bunch of speed work, you need to cut out the speed work and keep it low. And this is why the whole zone 2 thing is a great strategy, because it's making sure that you don't overstress the bone or the tendons, right? So then if you're going uphill is the most stressful, right? And that, I know that's obvious, but even going up a 5% gradient can like increase the strain on your Achilles like 35 to 55%. I think Dr. Rich Willie out of Montana Running Lab has that data. But so what does that mean? We need to limit hills. So even if you're running in your neighborhood and you're going up like 5 to 7% hills, that doesn't seem like a big deal. You want to limit those. We want to run probably in a heel drop shoe or a rocker shoe. They make rocker shoes for running. We want to limit speed work while we rebuild the shin's ability to tolerate impact. right? So we're stealing that stress and we're going to apply it in training, right? So the biggest thing we want to think is with plyos, it depends on if the person is running or not, or if they're doing like kind of a return to run. If they're doing a return to run, they're probably going to do hops every single day until they're running again. And then they're going to do their run workout, plyos, run workout, plyos, run workout, plyos, right? And it's going to be that where I've actually had really good success of combining isos and plyos together. This is the magic sauce right here, because isometrics are great for the tendon, great for the connective tissue, and great for the structure. Plyometrics don't really cause structural changes. They remove the inhibition of the nervous system and obviously strain the bone. So they're good for the nervous system and bone. They're not really building the tendon to any crazy degree. So on your non-running days, implementing heavy isometric work with plyo work is it's the 1-2 combo. It's the best. It's combo number 5. So thinking that, because like I said, bone can be stimulated every 6 to 8 hours. So how many impacts do you need to get bone stronger? Like 30, 40, 50, maybe upwards of 60. There's a bell curve, right? So there's diminishing returns past 60. So how easy is it for someone to go and do like a set of 4 sets of 10 pogos? Takes 30 seconds. So it depends on if someone's running, right? If someone's not running, they need to be doing their plyometrics like every single day, and they need to progress from low intensity pogos, double leg, to high intensity single leg. And obviously bone gets bored. So here's the important thing to know is whatever direction you load bone, it will get stronger in. But the best way to load bone is in multi-directions. That's why people who play sports where they're all changing direction have better bone density than runners. Runners will just have bone dense in one area. So it's important to make sure you don't just get stuck doing the same pogo or the same depth drop. You got to change angles. That's why doing like zigzag hops and speed skaters, or that is really important for bone, because you got to make sure it's hit in all directions. But my favorite is when someone's running, right? We obviously have to do the 24-hour rule to see if they're handling it. Bone lags about 21 days behind. So I'll say don't get crazy with changing stuff for like 3 weeks, because bone takes about 21 days for it to do that new cycle of bone formation, and bone is weakest in its 3rd week. Here's the rule. Bone is weakest in its 3rd week after starting a new training program, a new loading program, or hey, someone's just starting to run. So it's a really good idea that 3rd-ish week to kind of decrease volume a little bit and let it happen.
Fuck yeah, dude. That's our masterclass right there, dude. We got it.
Yeah. Yeah, we could go forever. But what people have to understand is you cannot handle collisions with the ground. That's it. It's not my tibs are tight. That doesn't mean you can't roll it, but most people are going to scrape it, they're going to tape it, they're going to poke it. Foam rolling does not stimulate bone remodeling. Dry needling does not stimulate bone remodeling. Scraping does not stimulate bone remodeling. K-tape does not stimulate bone remodeling. Cold tubs do not stimulate bone remodeling. Hot tubs do not stimulate bone remodeling. You must build your bones up, and runners are notoriously bad, and people are notoriously bad for building their bone density, or if they do, they give up after 2 months when bone takes months of time. And obviously, the final point, I'll make this real quick. A lot of people are getting bone stress injuries and having issues because they're not fueling appropriately, and that's more for the endurance athletes. But you need to make sure that you're getting your vitamin D, that if you need to supplement with stuff like vitamin K, that's fine. But my big 4 for supplementation for bone health is going to be vitamin K. If you're in a place that doesn't get sun, vitamin D, but if not, get sunshine, magnesium, and then boron. Those are the 4. People are going to ask that. But that's more for endurance athletes than like a strength athlete.
Fuck yeah, dude. This is exactly what we wanted. And the difference between a shin splint and a stress fracture was money too, because I feel like that's a massive
Well, and
question
final caveat, yes, there are people that have biomechanical issues that can't pronate their foot, can't dorsiflex. Obviously, if joints can't move, that's a problem. There's other stuff too. It's not just do tib raises and you're fixed.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a little bit more nuance there to a problem that hasn't had a solution to it. That's my favorite thing, dude. It's like if there was an answer, this question would not pop up over and over again, because everybody would just spread the answer like
no. So one person might not be able to pronate their foot. The other person might be pronating their foot, but has horrendous stiffness at their Achilles tendon, so their muscles have to do all the work and not the tendon. The other person might just have a piss weak soleus. The next person might have never done plyometrics before because they were cyclists. If you want to find people with absolute no history of plyometrics, grab a cyclist or swimmer and have them do plyos.
Oh, I'm looking at one right now.
Because I was one.
Tristan, we dunking yet?
Not yet, dude. The Epstein bar threw me off, but by 32.
By 32? Fuck yeah, dude. Well, I appreciate you coming on, Tristan. I appreciate you making this connection. This was dope. This is sick.
Yeah, guys. Hell yeah.
Fuck yeah. Thank you guys for listening. Keep chopping wood.
Thank you for listening. Join us next week as we dive down another rabbit hole. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star rating. Follow us on Instagram at Austin Yoakum to stay updated on future podcast guests. Keep chopping wood.